In this episode of the Orange Nerd Show, we're talking all about Star Wars. Dave Filoni gets a promotion at Lucasfilm. Daisy Ridley talks about her upcoming Rey movie. There's a lot to discuss here. I got Citrus George the Italiano and Tonez from the Bad Thoughts podcast here to join me on today's episode of OG55. Welcome aboard, everybody, to this episode of the Orange Nerd Show. On the Orange Nerd Show, we focus mostly on the studio side of things, like Marvel, Star Wars, all that stuff. We talk a little bit about the corporate side of things, so pretty much everything except the theme parks. But before we dive into today's topics, I want to introduce my fantastic panel. We got the Italiano, freshly shaven, the Italiano, right?
That's good.
Coming. Yeah.
Look, it's already coming in. It's already coming in. It's like,
and he shaved before the show too, which is crazy.
Yeah, right, exactly. If you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, George.
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Perfect. And down below, we got Tonez from the Bad Thoughts podcast. Always a pleasure having you on, sir.
Love being on here, bro. Love being on here. Yeah, if you guys want to follow me, I do have a podcast at Bad Thoughts Podcast. We have it on YouTube and Spotify, and you guys can find me on all platforms at Tonez_TV. We also have a studios channel where we do movie reviews and TV show reviews and stuff like that. So if you guys want to follow that, Bad Thoughts Studio as well.
Perfect. And I will be linking all of that good stuff in the description below. So make sure you follow, subscribe, and support our friend Tonez and his co-host, Candid Camper.
Yeah.
All right. Let's rock and roll, boys. So this is interesting. This dropped yesterday. And I think it was Variety Fair that actually had the scoop. But it says here, Star Wars undertakes universe-shaking changes after Ahsoka. Okay, so here we go. This is from Anthony Bresnikan. It says here that Dave Filoni has a new mission in the Star Wars universe after guiding Rosario Dawson's force-wielding hero to distant celestial realms in the first season of Ahsoka. The writer, producer, director, who started out working alongside George Lucas on the animated Clone Wars show nearly 2 decades ago, has ascended to a new position at Lucasfilm, one that will give him input into all the galactic storytelling going forward. So Tonez, I'm going to start with you, man. Okay, so Dave Filoni, right? He's kind of been a fan favorite for a little while now. People love the Clone Wars. Obviously, he was heavily connected to The Mandalorian, which was also a big hit for Disney. And more recently, Ahsoka. What are your thoughts on this? Dave Filoni getting promoted, having more say in what gets put out there.
See, the thing is, I love he fits perfectly in the position, which was crazy because the position initially didn't exist until they pretty much made up this position for him because there was no chief creative officer of Lucasfilm. So I believe they tried to make a position for him and kind of regards of what's going to be put out. The thing that kind of confuses me is that Kathleen Kennedy is pretty much connected with him, right, and putting things out and all that stuff. So, and there was initial reports that she was going to be let go, later this year or sometime next year. I wonder who the one was who promoted, Dave Filoni. That's the question that is kind of out there and needs to be answered. Because if Kathleen was the one who promoted him, it kind of seems like she did it to, I don't know, to save her job necessarily, but make better projects, which was kind of where I'm at right now.
That's actually a very interesting question, and probably the most important question, really, at the end of the day, Tonez, that you bring up, because so if she did it on her own, like you said, is she trying to save her job because she sees the writing on the wall, right? Mm-hmm. Or was she forced to do it? Was it Bob Iger saying, "Hey, look, you know what, Kathleen? you're not cutting it. I'm gonna have to elevate Filoni here to kind of work alongside you. So it's very, very interesting. Now, Filoni, yeah, I mean, overall, I support this move because I do like Filoni. I think he did a great job with Clone Wars. I liked Ahsoka. Didn't love it, but I liked it. I think overall, Filoni has a great understanding of Star Wars. He was George Lucas's apprentice, basically, when Lucas was still there. So he understands the material. And really, there really isn't anyone else that I could think of to really fill this spot at this time. I think he is the best to do that. But we'll see how this works out. We still have Kathleen running the overall studio. Like, that's still his boss, But we'll see. George, what do you think? Filoni taking more power. He's basically right under, he's right there with Kennedy, like under Kennedy. Do you like this move? Don't like this move?
I think it's a very decent move. I think it's a very strategic move. No matter whose name is kind of on this, whether it's Kennedy herself or if it was Iger kind of pushing Kennedy to do so. I personally feel like it's a little bit of a mixture of both.
Okay.
I think Iger is basically kind of giving Kennedy the benefit of the doubt, a little bit of a mix of an ultimatum by have promote Filoni, as you had mentioned, both Tonez and OG that you were saying, to kind of have him by her side, kind of shadow. So in a sense where he's kind of like being her apprentice, that in time, he will be taking her job, but also the ultimatum coming in as Iger saying, you know what, this is your choice. It's either you can bow out now, give Filoni an upgrade, so to speak, in his job at Lucasfilm, or whether or not it's one false move, then you're out, you're done, and then I'll use Filoni.
Yeah.
And personally, I feel that, I mean, I know if that is the case, I mean, they haven't confirmed that one way or the other. I feel like that's still kind of beating around the bush. I feel Kennedy has had one too many chances already. I think Indy 5, despite that I did enjoy the movie, but I feel like that it was still underwhelming.
Like
for
reception,
the hype.
like box office and stuff.
Yeah, that it was enough to hold Kennedy's job as president of Lucasfilm. Yeah. So I really thought that was going to be the nail in the coffin there, but apparently not. But I think that this is kind of small moves moving forward as to where her career is going to be. And I really think no matter really how you look at it, it seems like her job is on the chopping block.
No, I think they're phasing her out. Absolutely. I mean, she's definitely on the way out. I know, with fandom and YouTube and all that stuff, I know she's been on the way out for a long time. And it almost became like a trope almost, but she really is. She's getting older. I mean, she's going to move on. So they elevated Filoni. Now, I don't necessarily believe Filoni will take Kennedy's spot as the studio chief, only because Filoni doesn't really have the Hollywood business side chops to kind of fill that spot.
That's for Favreau.
That's for Favreau, exactly. Favreau has that. And he works well with Filoni, obviously, and honestly, Favreau works well with Marvel too. And Feige, Favreau had a huge part in launching the MCU. So I think it really is his to lose. But it'll be, I think, Favreau replacing Kennedy, and I think under him will be Filoni with this creative spot. But the interesting thing too here is that, like, one of the things that I think kind of saved the prequels was because when the prequels came out, I'm old enough to remember when the prequels came out, man, the fans hated those movies, absolutely hated them. And it really wasn't until the Clone Wars shows came out that was set in that prequel era that fans started to kind of come around to the prequel era. I think Disney's going to go that route with the sequels because a lot of people don't like the sequel trilogy either. I think what they're going to do, they're going to take Filoni and they're going to start doing sequel trilogy material, like we're going to talk about it in a minute, the Rey movie, and they're going to start to create films and shows based on the sequel trilogy and hopefully kind of create change like the fan perception of the sequel era through ancillary material and kind of fill in gaps of the sequel trilogy with this new material. And so the fans are more welcoming of this new era, very similar to what happened with the prequels. But what are your thoughts on that, Tonez? Like, I mean, with the whole thing with this Ray movie coming out and all that, is it possible they can kind of turn this ship around through new movies based in this era like they did the prequels, or do you think it's kind of too late?
No, I don't think it's too late. I mean, Star Wars is something that you can always go back to, and unfortunately, some of the movies that did come out weren't so good or enjoyable. I do want to say this: Skeleton Crew and the Acolyte that are coming out, he has no imprint on these, so you got to give it 2 or 3 years to be able to see the impact Filoni's gonna be putting in Star Wars. So don't think of it. It's like overnight things are just gonna switch, because people are gonna expect that, but you guys got to give it 2 or 3 years to even see the impact that he has. But I do think he can turn it around. Being an apprentice of Lucasfilm, like you have that under your belt to be able to put what you were taught on the screen and what people loved seeing on screen. So I'm very much looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Tonez, I'm really glad that you brought up that point about the lag time, right? Like a lot of fans don't understand that. They think a new person takes over and then immediately there's going to be all these things that we're going to see on screen that are going to be different. Not really. These films take years and these shows take years to develop. So Filoni will come in and he'll look at everything that's kind of being planned right now, and he'll input and he'll change things and do things. But like you said, Tonez, it's going to be a few years before we really start to see the fruits of Filoni's like labor, and look, you know what? I mean, look, in terms of this decision too, I mean, I don't really.
Is that something that we really want to look at?
Right. The fruits of his labor. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. But that's something that too, I think that like, obviously I think Bob Iger had some say in this. Obviously it's a pretty big move, but it's a smart one. Filoni has really been, in terms of like Star Wars, he's been attached to most of the successes, with whether it be Clone Wars, whether it be Mandalorian, even Ahsoka. I mean, maybe not a huge hit like Mando, but it was a modest hit, in my opinion. And some of the other stuff that maybe, didn't do as well, right? Like Kenobi. A lot of fans didn't like Kenobi. He wasn't a part of that, right? So he's got a pretty good track record, and we'll see what he can do. We'll see if he can see if he can work his magic and kind of change how fans kind of see this, So
I do want to bring something up that you had mentioned earlier, that people were pushing for him to be, in Kathleen Kennedy's position, which I think would be a terrible idea, because he does film. Like, he is a person who looks over film and writes scripts and this stuff, but he doesn't know the business side of what Kennedy does, which, not that she's been doing an amazing job, but she has that knowledge of how to run the company. He's more of a filmmaker, which is what he should put most of his time into doing, and not having to worry about that aspect of the company. So I think the position that he was upgraded to is perfect for him, and we'll see, the imprint he has. But I do think, from what we see now, I think it's a great position.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that, Tonez. Like, you can't have him running the whole studio, because like you said, he doesn't have the executive chops. He doesn't have the business corporate chops for that. He's a creative all the way through. So he's got this position, it's high enough where he has a lot of say in what goes on.
Exactly.
But he's not necessarily like the guy, like, running the whole thing, where like a lot of that business Hollywood stuff comes in, So, we'll see how that kind of works out. Another thing that's kind of interesting too is how the fandom is sort of reacting to this. There's a certain segment of the fandom that's like, you can already kind of see it. They're kind of demonizing this guy. And I think a lot of that has to do with, and I'll just say it, like a lot of these YouTube channels and stuff, like they've kind of come up from kind of hating on Kathleen Kennedy, right? Well, I think the writing's on the wall with Kathleen Kennedy. I mean, we all know she's going to leave soon. So they got to kind of pick a new bad guy. And I can kind of see, like, they're kind of starting to target Filoni a little bit, like, this guy's not that great, this, that, and the other. And it's like they need to fill that void when Kennedy eventually leaves. Like, Filoni's the new bad guy. I got to say, man, I don't like that at all, because I think Filoni has, well, I don't love everything he does, because he there has been decisions he's made that I don't really love. but at the end of the day, it's like he respects the franchise. He loves the franchise, and I mean, I trust him more than just about anyone else I could think of, maybe next to Favreau. But what are your thoughts on that, George, in terms of like, you know, this kind of narrative out there right now that, you know, they're trying to drag Filoni a little bit.
What I think that what could potentially be happening is they're going to tie Filoni already with the bad taste that they have for the sequels, and Filoni
had nothing to do with
had nothing to do with those. You know, it was on, you know, Abrams and
Kennedy,
Johnson and Kennedy. You know, like they were the ones that created that storyline and what have you. And again, this is Orange Nerd. I know we're not going to go into the parks, but even sort of what they did with Batu at Galaxy's Edge, and the Galactic Star Cruiser. It's like they enforced this one tone narrative with these sequels that it just people aren't really going for anymore. So what they're going to do is anytime that someone is going to bring that up or try to even fix it, possibly, hopefully Filoni can do so, you know, that he's the one that's going to get the backlash for it. But I mean, if he can do it and it's done well, which I think it could be done, just as you had mentioned, OG, with the prequels, I would actually love to see in the same format of the Clone Wars and Rebels. It's sort of like, but use the sequels for that. I mean, it'd be cool to do it in live action, but I mean, I would love to see it as that animated kind of format. I think would be.
So you're saying you would like a show, like a show based in the sequel trilogy era that they can go for a few seasons.
Correct.
And sort of.
Yes,
that's interesting.
And I think that would be the one way that can kind of capture people to maybe give it a chance.
Right.
Because they're saying, okay, well, we love Clone Wars, we love Rebels, you know, so let's kind of give this a chance. Because I think, honestly, not saying that it can't be done, but if it's going to be done again, it has to be done well. Because, I mean, this repetitive thing with Palpatine, and they had a thing going with Snoke, and unfortunately, that's the one thing that I disagreed with Rian Johnson when he did The Last Jedi, to kill off Snoke in the matter that he did. And then when it got handed back to JJ, it was like, okay, now I got to change this whole thing and make it as if it was Palpatine at the end of it, you know? So.
Well, that's one thing too. I don't necessarily, Snoke was a cool character and I would like to dive into him a little more. I'm not necessarily opposed to Palpatine. My issue with the Palpatine kind of direction is that it really wasn't explained that well. It was like Poe literally says somehow Palpatine returned. It was like, come on. And that's one thing too that I would like to see like in a series or something, like the animated show you're talking about, George?
Right, like
flesh that out a little bit.
Exactly, like from the time when Vader threw Palpatine down, you know, to apparently his death, continue that story, but through Palpatine's story. Like, where did he go from there?
Well, like, what was Palpatine's contingency plan and the clones and all that? Really flesh that out. Kind of let us know, like, give us some details as to how, you know, his rise came again. You know, I would like to see that in, like, whether it be a live action movie, whether that be maybe a live action show, maybe an animated show. I don't know. But what are your thoughts on that, Tonez? Like, I mean, the whole sequel trilogy thing, there were some things in there like the Palps and all that stuff that, I don't know, really wasn't explained. I mean, would you like to see some more sequel trilogy stuff kind of out there that will kind of fill in these gaps to make it make more sense? Or
yes and no. The thing that I have, especially nowadays, just with film in general, is you don't know what is canon and what's not canon, and it kills the experience dramatically. And you know, I talk about Marvel, you don't know what the hell's going on over there. And Star Wars with, you know, Rey and that, you had Rogue One. I mean, you kind of knew what happened with Rogue One, and it just, you don't know what is canon and what's not. And at this point, you know, having the trilogies and the, you know, all that stuff, you kind of know what was canon at that point. But all these like side characters and stuff like that, it just confuses everyone. And I think that's what's killing, you know, businesses like Marvel and Star Wars and, you know, the DCU and stuff like that. And I think that's what's happening in film today, especially with big series like Star Wars.
And you bring up a fair point there, Tones, because we're seeing it like with Marvel. There is a downhill trend for sure with Marvel, and a lot of that I think a lot of that is connected to that cinematic universe element. Where look, if you fall behind in the MCU, if you're 2 or 3 shows behind, well, a lot of people think, well, I got to catch up before I can watch the new movie. Well, if you wait to see the new movie, you're hurting the box office. So now the movie isn't doing that great, So it's hurting the overall box office receipts and what have you. So I think there's an element of that with Star Wars. They release so much, and people feel like, well, I'm behind on the last one, so I can't really watch this one yet. So yeah, no, absolutely. What do you think, George? Like, do you kind of feel like that? I mean, I know your son kind of makes you watch all the Star Wars stuff, so you're not really behind, but.
Yeah, basically. But that's just it. If he wouldn't let me, it entice me to watch it, I'd be completely lost, more than what I already am. It's like, but it's true. If you miss one movie or one show, one episode out of line, it's like then you don't know what's going on. And I think that's where, kind of going off what Tones was saying with both Marvel and Star Wars, I feel like they're intertwining stories just a little bit too much. Just give us a show or a movie that's in the universe, but it doesn't have any kind of connection that you have to watch something before, during, or after to understand it. Just give us a kick-ass movie, show, whatever, and then just let it be that. It's like when we would watch like the old classic, like the like you had mentioned, OG, like from the 80s, like He-Man and all those kind of shows. Imagine like you'd be watching He-Man, but it's intertwined with another show.
Like
and you'd have to watch
She-Ra or this one or that one. And then
it's like
watch that to watch this.
Exactly. No, just you watch He-Man to watch He-Man. You watch SWAT Cats to watch SWAT Cats. It's like
have you guys seen the Flash and Green Arrow and those series, like Superwoman? Did you guys see those series?
I saw the CW? Flash. I was like, I got like 5 or 6 seasons into that one, I think.
So on those series, you would go halfway through Flash, and you'll see a cut of, like, you don't know what the hell happened, because you would have to go to the Green Arrow series to see an episode on there.
That's like some of the like Law and Orders. I used to hate that shit because I'm a huge fan of Law and Order, like with SVU and Criminal Intent and what have you. And you have to watch an episode of one of the series, and then it continues on the other series, and it's like I could never stand that.
It's a gimmick. It's a scheme,
Yeah, I know it's not to that extreme when it comes to Star Wars, but it has the same concept of you don't know what's going on, and I think that's what's missing right now, in my opinion.
No, 100% Tones. Now, one thing to Filoni's credit is, I think that, which I do think Star Wars is, or at least with the sequel trilogy, was sorely lacking, was one cohesive kind of vision, like straight through vision. I do think Filoni has chops when it comes to this, because his like Filoni verse, for the most part, like makes a lot of sense, and it seems like it's more cohesive. It seems like he knows where he wants to take things. Like when you watch a Filoni show, like Rebels, there's things that happen in like maybe some of the like early episodes that you're like, what the hell is this? Space whales? Why are there space whales here? That you think it's a total filler episode, but then it, like, by the end of Rebels, you realize, oh, that's why the space whales, right? Like he had a vision and he knows where it's going, and it all plays in and it makes sense by the end. It's like one big puzzle basically that he puts together. And that's one thing I feel that the sequel trilogy was really lacking, was that they didn't have that overall vision. Like George was saying, it was like, okay, we killed Snoke off, now we need something else. Oh, what do we do? Oh, Palpatine, I think with Filoni on board, I think that will improve. I think we'll get a little bit more of a planned kind of vision, roadmap. Because I don't know, before the sequel trilogy was all over the place. And to be honest, I liked all 3 movies, but as a trilogy, it didn't really work that great,
Yeah.
And there's only so much Reylo you can handle. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny too, because Reylo is actually kind of a cool concept, but they didn't really. I think it could have been executed better. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like a bad idea, But I think it was kind of
I
thrown
got
in.
enough of that with Days of Our Lives.
Days of Our Lives, yeah. Right? Okay, here we go. Now, this is the second topic we're going to bring up here. It says Daisy Ridley opens up about her Star Wars return. Says, quote, the story is really cool. And then her quotes down here. Give me 1 second. It says here, not much is known about the story of the film, other than it takes place 15 years after the rise of Skywalker, and it will see Rey rebuilding the Jedi Order. The actress has been told some details about it, and while she didn't share any, she did say she's very excited about it, and it took her by surprise at first. Quote, I am very excited. The story is really cool. I'm waiting to read the script because obviously I don't have any other updates. It's not what I expected, but I'm very excited. Now, here's the thing that's kind of yeah, right. Now, here's the thing that's kind of interesting too, and then I got to get your take on this, Tones. She also said here, quote, I know the storyline for one film. That's interesting. One film. That's not to say that that's all it is, but that's what I was told about. And I can imagine it will be the next film, I think. I mean, again, I don't know, post strikes and everything, how quickly everything will start up again. But yeah, so far, I know the story of one film, and I think people will be very excited. Now, Tones, what are your thoughts on this out the gate? It sounds like there's going to be more than one Rey movie, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and see, I'm on the side. I didn't mind those films with her. She's a great actress, in my opinion. She played a good role. I didn't love the movies. I liked them, but you know, the extreme diehards have their strong opinions on her and you know her story. But I personally like those films. Now, the thing that scares me is the what did she say? It took me by surprise, but I thought when I read that, I rolled my eyes and I said, "Oh God!" It just when the main actress says it took me by surprise, and not in like a one part of the movie took her by surprise. You know, the whole script took her by. I know she said she didn't have too much detail in it, but she should have been told something if she has that kind of, you know, opinion on saying it took her by surprise. You know, so, you know, I personally did, I liked her movies. You know, I don't know your guys' opinions on those, but I think one or two films shouldn't be too bad if they do it correctly. I don't know if Dave Filoni is going to have any kind of, you know, mark on these movies because they were already, you know, in talks and pretty much written, I believe, at this point. So we'll see on those. But yeah, I don't mind that. Just a little thing that scares me. That's all.
Well, yeah, when you have her saying that it took me by surprise, look, I mean, taking risks is good, but at the same time, okay, so when you risk take like that, right, and you have a movie that's a big surprise, that could go really well for you and work out great, and you took the risk and it paid off, but it could also go the other direction real fast. So when you do those big surprises like that, right? So it's like, oh, we'll see, and we'll see, Tones, like you mentioned with Filoni, you know, he's coming in there now. Is he going to read these scripts and decide, maybe not? Here we go. We'll change this. We'll tweak that. Really curious how Filoni kind of plays in that sequel trilogy sandbox because he hasn't really done it that often. I think there was an animated show called Resistance, but I don't think he was too heavily tied to that. So I'm curious to see how he kind of inputs into this era. What do you think, George, in terms of like a Rey movie, or what? According to her, it's going to be more than one movie. Do you like the idea? Not so much. Where you stand, brother?
So to kind of go off of what Tones was saying, kind of going back a little bit, I liked the sequel trilogy. I didn't love it. I felt like there was just a lot of inconsistency between like the creative minds, like of what direction the storyline is going to go, switching with directors and what have you. It felt like to me it was all over the place. I think this will give Daisy Ridley an opportunity to kind of showcase her character in a much better environment than what the sequel trilogy gave her. And I feel like, and Tones kind of mentioned this, as far as like the diehard Star Wars fans, I feel like I'm probably going to get heat for this, but I feel like that they tend to just lean everything that involves Star Wars back to the original George Lucas films, and there's nothing on this earth, no matter who it is, whether it's George Lucas himself, is never going to be able to touch those original 3 films. It's just it's never going to be. So the diehard Star Wars fans have to get out of this mindset of trying to compare everything of Star Wars in the Star Wars lore to the original films, because it's just not going to happen.
Well, it's very similar when like Walt Disney died, you know. I mean, it was like everything was compared to Walt's stuff, and it's like, look, these things have to move on and evolve, and they have to grow. George Lucas isn't going to be around forever. Obviously, he's not really involved right now, but eventually, Star Wars is going to have to do its thing, and other people are going to take it over, and we're seeing that now already. But you know, you can't be so like clutched onto the past like so tightly that you're just so rigid against any kind of any kind of change or any kind of like evolving of this franchise. It needs to do that. If we want Star Wars to go on and on and on for generations to come, it needs to evolve. It can't be stuck in 1977 forever. You know, a lot of fans don't understand that. You know,
I totally agree, and I think that's what the diehards are hoping for, is to get some kind of George Lucas impact in these new movies, which is not going to happen. You know what I'm saying? I think that's what they're hoping for, and they have false hope, because it's never going to happen. He's never going to come back. He's never going to write these, you know, movies or shows or whatever the case may be. You know, he's done with it. So either hop on, or what, obviously if you don't like the movie or the shows that come out, you don't like them, you know, but don't go into it thinking bad thoughts already,
right?
Because that's you're gonna have a bad time watching these movies or shows.
Well, that's only for the Bad Thoughts podcast.
Exactly. Exactly.
I like that plug. That was good. That was smooth. That was smooth. No, but that's the thing too. Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because a lot of the diehards, right, will be like, "Yeah, we got to get George Lucas back in there." It's like Kathleen Kennedy was George Lucas's call. That was not even a Bob Iger decision. Like when he sold Star Wars or Lucasfilm to Disney, she came with that deal. That was the Lucas hire. Like he hired her. So it's like, I don't understand this thing where people think like George Lucas will just come back and take over Star Wars and that's going to fix all the problems. Like he's not getting rid of Kathleen Kennedy. He put her there. Yep. You probably have a better chance of her getting fired right now than you do if George Lucas came back, you know, to be honest. So we'll have to see, but yeah, the sequel trilogy, like obviously it was very controversial, you know, 3 films, very much like the prequels. We'll see how they handle this stuff. Look, they only have this Rey movie or movies. It really needs to swing for the fences. We need a home run with this because the fandom is real divided on the sequel trilogy, and I think that in order to turn this ship around, we got to get something that everyone's kind of on board with for the most part. And if you have another set of films with these Rey movies it's very divided and divisive, I don't know how long fans are going to be on board with this era if you're not producing something that they can kind of get behind, you know? So this is a very important movie for this era of Star Wars, because fans might, if this doesn't hit, fans might give up on that era. They might be like, you know what? It's not working for me. We did the sequel trilogy. Now we got this Rey stuff. I don't like it. And it might just be like, we're done. You know, now the prequels were lucky because the Clone Wars followed it and they were bangers. I mean, Clone Wars was a banger. So if you produce the right thing, you can definitely turn it around, but you got to produce the right thing, you know?
And who had their hand in Clone Wars?
Filoni.
Exactly.
He's the guy. He's absolutely the guy. And, you know, I mean, look, the guy has his flaws, you know, no one's perfect. And there's going to be some creative decisions that as fans, we're not going to all love. But I mean, who else can do it? Who else at Lucasfilm is really, he's the best. He's the most equipped. And I think this is absolutely the right decision. So we'll see.
And they literally made the position for him. Like no one was ever in that position before him. They literally came up with this position for him so he could be part of it.
It kind of reminded it when you say that, Tones, it kind of reminds me of the position when that John Lasseter was in when he took over for both animation studios, Walt Disney and Pixar, and then they also made him chief creative officer for WDI, for Walt Disney Imagineering, which actually, even though they kind of already had those positions there, but it was very rare that you would see someone in the animation studio side kind of transfer over to work in WDI. So it's kind of interesting that now Filoni is in a position where he has that creative power in something that was never even existing at Lucasfilm.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, for them to create a position for him, just for him, tells you that Iger and Burbank, they're very happy with Filoni. They're very happy with him and what he's done.
And really how Iger, I believe, is kind of going down the path of getting rid of Kennedy. Because I feel like, OG, you and I had that conversation where, we felt that Dana Walden was kind of, leaning more towards, possibly being a front runner to take over CEO of the company. And,
Right.
With her being on Team Kennedy, it feels like it kind of took her shots down, because I feel like Iger is just not pleased with Kennedy's performance as president.
Well, and Kennedy is really Hollywood royalty, and I think there's a lot of apprehension on letting her go,
Oh yeah.
appearances and all that stuff. So they're like kind of like they're walking on eggshells. But
And I think that's why Iger is trying all these different outlets first before just pulling
Letting
the
her
plug
go.
completely. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think this
yeah.
is the first move by promoting Filoni.
Yeah, because Filoni will get in there in this position. He'll kind of set up his team and how he wants things to be done, and then things will kind of be in place when they eventually put the new person in there to replace Kennedy. Hopefully, it's Favreau, but we'll see. I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be very very interesting to see how this whole thing kind of shakes out. But yeah, I want to thank you, fellas, for coming on talking some Star Wars with me. Tones. Always a pleasure, brother. Check out this guy. They do phenomenal work over there. I was recently on their Game of Thrones show. We talked some Game of Thrones. We talked House of Dragon. A great time. Links down below. Subscribe to them. Follow them. They do great stuff. But Tones, if you can just remind everybody where they can find you, all that good stuff on social media, sir.
Yeah, appreciate inviting me on again, and you definitely guys will be on my show again for sure. Go ahead and follow the podcast I have with me, the Candid Camper, Bad Thoughts Podcast on Spotify and YouTube. Also, I have a TV show and movie review, Bad Thoughts Studios, and we do exactly that, TV show, movie reviews, and stuff like that. So go ahead and follow that. And if you guys want to follow me on social media, Tones_TV on all platforms.
Perfect. Links down below. Right over here, we got the Italiano. The Italiano. If you could let everybody at home know where they could find you on social media, sir. And if you're and does your beard that you just cut off, does that have a social media of its own? The little hair pile, or no?
He got that. Does he has his own zip code?
His own zip code. You lost like George lost like 5 pounds when he shaved that beard on.
Basically, yeah. And by tomorrow I'll gain it back. That's the blessing and a curse of being an Italiano. But you know what? I have to say I'm blessed to have all this hair, because a lot of people don't have it. So
yeah, I think the three of us were able to grow pretty hefty.
See, I'm half Italian, so mine grows half the time as your guys's, but it still grows fast. It just takes me like 12 hours instead of 24 hours for you.
Now, Tones, have you always rocked the beard? Have you been rocking the beard for a while, or?
Yeah, when I first grew my beard, I was like 14, 15, and I kind of had to thinner because I didn't grow hair up here. But once I got in my like early 20s, I started growing facial hair like all over the place. So I was able to line it up how I wanted to. So yeah, I've always had a beard.
I had a full mustache by the time I was 11. And it was literally, as I said, when I started middle school, when I walked in, they thought I was the substitute teacher.
What's funny is totally off subject, but what's funny is I was born with a gray hair in my back of my head. Wow. I have one gray hair in the back of my head right here. I was born with it.
Now, it was actually funny that you say that. Now, I was born, I actually already had a ponytail, like a little rat, like a little rat tail. Like I already had hair that was back there. And my mom went for my first haircut because she was just going to let it grow. She was just going to let it grow as long as it possibly can go. But then she had it cut, and I still have that piece of hair. It's in my my baby book.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. That's wild, man. Yeah. That's wild.
So, anyways, other than our,
we should We should do a whole show on beer. That'd be great.
I know, right?
That'd be great. The three Italians, yeah. or the 2.5, the 2.5, the 2.5, the 2.5 Italian men. That's it.
There we go. There we go.
I'll be there.
But if you want to find me on social media, you could do so at on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Perfect. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming on, and thank you all so much for watching this episode of the Orange Nerd Show. Make sure you comment down below with all your thoughts on today's topics. Also, make sure you check out the Bad Thoughts guys over there. They are phenomenal. We love them. They are family. Down below in the description. Thank you so much for watching Orange Nerd, and as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye, everybody.